thank you so much. I'm very tired. I got in this morning, and in Seattle it is 7 a.m., so a little disoriented, but I'm so happy to be here. Like he said, my name is Cassidy Williams, and I'm an engineer at CodePen. I've been there for about 3 weeks now, so I actually made this talk. I pitched and made this talk before I even joined CodePen, and now I'm going to be using it. So I promise it wasn't supposed to be like an ad for my employer, but you know, it happens. And my handle is Cassidy. You can tweet me whenever you want. I like making new friends. But anyway, I am encouraging making graphics with CSS for many different reasons, and a lot of people are just like, why would you do this to me? But so first of all, I think that making CSS art will make you better at CSS. When I initially decided to start doing this, and I've been doing this for about 3 years now, a little less, give or take. I was not very good at CSS, and I was like, hey, maybe if I just try making cool things that look pretty, I'll get better at it. And honestly, it helped. After doing it, I started making weekly things on CodePen and things just kind of privately for myself. I started to be able to just see something and be able to figure out how I would code it in CSS without having to actually look up what border radius, how that should be formatted, or how lines should work and everything. And it was a good way to kind of teach myself how design works a little better and also just how to code CSS better. Also, just as a developer, it's very helpful to see graphics a little more modularly. For the designers in the room, you might be saying later in the talk, like, this is basic. But for a developer, it blew my mind that you could kind of break graphics down into little components just like you would a React application, for example. And then also making CSS art kind of forces you to think critically about how you're going to organize your code, because you have to make sure it's clean so that way you can figure out what you're doing when you want to, for example, put an ear on a face or something, because you don't want your CSS to get too messy as you're getting bigger and bigger with the things that you're making. And that really helps with your larger projects as you scale too, how you don't want to nest things too deeply and how you want to make things as generic as possible and reusable as possible. That being said, in terms of thinking about CSS graphics, I wanted to just give a few examples of graphics that I found just on Dribbble, and then show you how we can kind of look at them from a CSS perspective. And so I have my little mouse. I'm not sure if you can see, but in this little bench, when you're looking at, for example, those top two blue rectangles, those are just blue rectangles. You can make a div that have a certain width and height, have the background blue, and then might have a little border radius. You can position them right on top of each other. And then the bottom one, there's a few different ways you can do that. You can use the CSS perspective and make it slanted this way. You could even do a nice little hack with borders where you can make the bottom border blue and then the side borders transparent, because that makes the little slants. And then it's just kind of curved lines behind the bench there. And then for the little leaves, that's kind of just making ovals with a border radius and rectangles. And for this blobby blue background, I probably wouldn't make that in CSS, let's be honest. I'd make it just a circle. But anyway, that's kind of a way to think about this graphic that way. And I have a couple others that I wanted to show. This is kind of similar in that it's very simple shapes. You can make two circles where you have a div that has the border radius all the way around, and then you can add a linear gradient on, as the background for each of those two circles there. And then the line at the top, that can just be a linear gradient down, and then you can have a shadow behind it to kind of add that glow. And then for this last one, this is all just line art, and it's really just breaking down each one. The ear is a rectangle that has the border radius, and these are just all different border radii. Is that the right word? For a bunch of different divs all pushed together. And looking at graphics this way, it kind of helps you figure out, okay, how am I going to code it? How am I going to put it together? And it kind of helps you figure out how designers think a little more too, which is really helpful and interesting, at least I think. So I wanted to talk really quickly about the tools that you should have handy for if you want to make these CSS graphics. So first of all, you should have a place to code, for example, CodePen, so that way you can put your code somewhere where you're going to be putting everything. A color picker. I myself am not a designer, so a lot of times I try to recreate a design and then add a twist and then credit the author later. And so on Mac, there's a default one called Digital Color Meter. On PC, there's a ton of color picker apps that you can download. But yeah, having a color picker where you can just grab those really quick and stick those in is really helpful. And then something to measure pixels. When I'm feeling really like cocky, I just eyeball it and I say, yeah, that's about 200 pixels and go for it. But if you want to be exact, you can use like a screenshotting tool or something and see what the exact dimensions are of certain aspects of the graphics that you're trying to make. So that's the most of my talk. Now we're going to actually get into the live coding bit. And if you'd like to follow along, you totally can. That being said, we're going to start with some audience interaction because I want you to pick the graphic that I'm going to make. I haven't made any of these before, and so it'll be very truly live. And so I just picked a bunch of London ones because we're here. So there's this one. I figure I'll start with the bus, and then if we have time, we'll move over to the other two things. We have this fun Big Ben one. I thought that was kind of cute with the little clouds and everything. This, I thought the bus was cute. Mostly I just picked cute things. And then this one I thought was fun. I would probably avoid doing the man because that would get a little too detailed for this talk. But so if we call these like 1, 2, 3, 4, someone shout out a number. 2. Oh, crap. I should have thought this out. Okay, I'll do show of hands and kind of show best judgment. Okay, hands for 1. Okay, hands for 2. Okay, that's more than 1, so I'm just going to knock out 1. Okay, hands for 3. Dang. And then hands for 4. Okay, 2, 1. Or 2 is the winner. Okay, cool. We are going to make this graphic in CodePen. This should be a fun thing. Okay, so I'm just going to open that up in its own little tab there, and I'm going to put CodePen on the side right back here. And again, if you would like to code along with me, I'm going to pull aside this JS. We're just doing CSS today. Let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to pull up is my digital color meter because we're going to need a background color. And that background color, body, background. And if anybody has a joke they want to share while I do this, I'm happy to listen because I love jokes. Okay, wow, we already have the background color. We're basically done. So there are a few different elements of this Big Ben tower and sticker thing. So we have this half circle thing. We have the label down here, and then we have the actual clock tower. I am going to separate it. I'm gonna put everything in a container because it's going to be centered. Ooh, look at me. I was doing CSS instead of HTML. And you know what? I'm actually going to do Haml because then I don't have to type out all of the different tags. And so I'm going to put everything in a container, and then it is kind of like CSS. So inside this container, we're going to have the clock. We're going to have the, I'm going to say sunrise, and then the label. And so clock. Also, is my font too small? Do you want me to zoom in, or are we okay? Okay, getting lots of okays. Start screaming if I'm wrong. Sunrise and label. That's good enough for now. And so I'm going to break up the clock first. There's going to be this top part, and then these little rectangles with the windows. There's this face, and then there's the bottom. So the bottom will be the easiest part to do because that's a rectangle. And then we'll have the face, and then with that, there's going to be the series of windows. I'm just going to call that a ledge. I don't know if there's proper names for things on Big Ben. If there is, I'm sorry. And then, let's see. What's this slanty thing? Let's call it slanty 1, and then we'll have slanty 2 at the top. Slanty 2, and then this will also be ledge 1 and ledge 2, because I'm not that creative. Cool, saved, done. That's all broken up, and we have empty divs on the page. And then we also have our sunrise, and then the sunrise, it'll just have these 3 red things. Actually, I'm just going to have a class red, and I'll leave it at that. We'll experiment with it. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to position my container. There's a few different ways to position things in the center of the page, and this way is the way I've found to be the most easy. If you position it absolute, when you position something absolute, it's positioned absolutely to the previous container that's relative, and right now that's just body, and body is relative, so there you go. And I'm going to do top 50% and then left 50, and that puts the top left corner of your graphic in the middle of the page. But wait a minute, that's not centered, so we have to transform it a little bit. And you do transform, translate, negative 50%, negative 50%. That centers everything in our container, so the clock will always be in the middle of the page with these 4 lines of code. And I don't have to touch container anymore, which is pretty nice. Next, I'll do the sunrise first. Sunrise. So we know our sunrise is going to be a circle, and I'm using my little screenshot tool to see what size that is. And that is about 180 height-ish, 170, 350. That's fine. I'll just go with it. What was that? 350 pixels, and then height. Let's say 175, because then it's exactly half. And then, because I have the width and the height, I'll do the background color as this right here. Oops. Background. So we got our color there. Beautiful. And now, to make it round, we have to add the border radius, but we don't want the border radius at the bottom, so we have our nice little border top left radius, aptly named, and then I'll just do 50%, then border top right radius. Actually, 50% is wrong because then it only does half the height. I'm going to go exact 175 pixels, and then 175 pixels. Yay, we have a half circle. Again, basically done. And we also have our border, and this is a dark blue there. Copy that color, and then we'll do the border. That's about 10 pixels, right? I have no idea. 10 pixels, solid, that. Whoa, check it out. Okay, cool, we have part of our sun. I love it. Now, one little thing that I like to say is every single div is actually 3 divs because of pseudo elements. And so you can have a before and after in each div, and then you don't have to actually create an element. So actually, I can take out this red class completely and just have sunrise. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a preprocessor, less or Sass. I'll do less this time for kicks. So with those, I purely use them for nesting because I really like nesting in there. And so what I can do is before, you want your pseudo elements to be display block and content none. So I'm going to actually do that for both of these. Before and after, display block, and content none. Well, empty string. So in doing that, that creates 2 empty elements that you can completely style out of this one sunrise div here. And so I'm going to individually style each of those. Okay. Here. And then let's see, we'll make that this inner red one right here. Known as, let's see, 250 by 120-ish. It's 250 pixels by 120 pixels. And so we're going to do our background color as that darker red there. It's probably all just different opacities of a red, but that's okay. We can use exact colors. And then we're going to do that same thing, the border top left, border top right. I'm just going to copy it because I'm lazy. And we've got those, and we've got to make the radii actually match. It's actually correct, but just for accuracy. Oops. Okay, cool, it exists. Now we have to position it. And so this is similar to before. We can do a position, and then I'm just going to do absolute. And we're going to say bottom 0 to stick it at the bottom of this div here. Maybe bottom 10 pixels, so that way we can keep our little border. And then that's left 50%, and then I'm just going to add a transform. It's easy. Transform, translate, just translate x, negative 50%, and centered. Woo! Okay, cool. And now we're going to do pretty much the same thing with after. So I'm going to do another copy right here. See, everyone, this is thrilling. This is what you want to do with your spare time. Then with after, and then I just have to adjust the sizes. Let's see, 150 and 75, let's say. 150 and then 75. This is so fun. And then we need the color. Yay! Wow, check it out. We have our sunrise. Cool. And so that is the first part of it. Now we're done. Unfortunately, that was the easy part. Unfortunately for me, now I have to actually make Big Ben. Cool. So now we've got to make this clock. All right. So the clock is going to be positioned absolutely as well, and it's going to be at the bottom here. And then everything else is just going to kind of build on top of that initial positioning of the clock. I'm going to start with the bottom part first. And I'll add the stripes and everything later, because that is just extra. Okay, that's a pretty color. Okay, and then you know what? I'm going to be reusing this color a lot, and so I'm going to make a variable and just call it clock and do that. And so now we can make all of our Big Ben backgrounds clock. Cool. And then in terms of size, this thing is around 85 by 95. That's weird. Maybe I'll do 80 by 100. Or something. Let's see if that shows up. Cool, and it's out of the way. That's fine. We'll fix it. We're positioning absolutely, and absolutely, and then bottom 0. Because if we put it at the bottom 0, then it goes right there, and uh-oh, we're behind something, which means we've got to deal with Zee indexing. And so Zee index is going to be, I'm just going to do 10, but Zee index is how far it is from the page, and it positions it to the previously absolute positioned element. And so because the body is kind of at 0 and sunrise doesn't have any Zee indexing, this just puts it at 10 levels above that. And I just did 10 to be safe. I could have chosen 1,000. I could have chosen 1. As long as it's more than 0, it would have gone there. And I also, if I wanted to do negative 10, that would have put this behind everything. And so Zee indexing, it's great. And then I can stick left 50%, just like we did before. And then transform. And again, there's different ways of putting things left and right, as I'm sure you've seen between doing table layouts and margin auto and everything if you've done a lot of CSS. But this is a good way to do it for art purposes. Okay, oh, negative 50. There we go, centered. Wow, we have the bottom of our clock. Okay. Cool, that looks more yellow than that one. Oh, that's just the angle of me, that's fine. Okay, and then we're going to do the border of that same blue that we had before, and I'm going to put that in a variable as well. This one, I'm going to just call that blue, or blow. You guys are so quiet, it's riveting. I personally like doing this while having like video games in the background, especially that new Spider-Man game because he's a web developer. Okay. Thank you. Cool. All right, so we've got the bottom of our Big Ben. Now we've got to do this part. This is just a square, and it's going to be pretty much the same as the other one, and that is 95 by 85. That doesn't seem right. I'm just going to accept it. We're going to call that face with 95 by height 85. Going to do the same border, going to do the same background. Check it. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Now we just have to actually put that centered too. And you know what? Because these are all going to be stacked, what I can also do is do display flex and then flex direction column. Don't yell at me yet, renderer. Flex direction column, and then align items center. Boom, now they're centered. Yes, that made my life so much easier. Okay, cool. Now we have those parts of the clock. And I've noticed that the borders are kind of doubling up there. And so what I'll do with the face is position relative, and then I'm gonna bump it down. How wide was the border? 5 pixels. There we go. Now it's right there. And I notice it is down there too. I'll worry about that later. Okay, cool. Is everyone having a blast so far? Yeah, okay, great. So yeah, this is what I do for fun instead of going to parties. It's awesome. Okay, so this is the same width as the bottom thing. And then it has a height of 20 pixels. And it is ledge 1. I could also put a variable for the width, but I don't feel like it. And then we're doing the background clock again. This is starting to get repetitive, but hey, it's Big Ben. It's not my fault. Okay, cool. And so because we scooted the face down, that means that the ledge is a little too high than it should be. And so I've messed that up a little bit because now I'll have to position everything down a little bit more. You know what? It's okay. We're live coding. It's fine. So we're position relative because we're moving relative to the current position where it's at, naming. And we're going to go top 10 pixels now instead of 5. And we're just going to continually scooting things down. I'm actually going to do ledge 2 really quick because then I don't have to deal with rectangles anymore for now. And it's going to be pretty much the same, except I think it's a little taller and skinnier. So it's not the same. That's fine. And that is 50 by 30. Cool. All right, now we've got to do our ledge thing here. Now, diagonals are not my friend. There are so many ways to do diagonal things. And something that I mentioned before is when you want to do like a trapezoid shape, you could do a border bottom situation where, let me style it really quick, with slanty 1. What I could do, I'm not going to do it, but I'm going to show what you can do, is you can have the width and height not set at all initially. And then you can have border bottom is, I'm just going to say 20 pixels for the demo. 20 pixels, solid clock. And then border left is going to be whatever that angle is. I'm just going to say, I don't know. I'm also going to say 20, even though it's not it. I'll do 10. 10 pixels, solid, transparent. And then same with border right. And so what that does, it's only made a little triangle right now. Let me do a width just so you can see it a little better. So that's a little trapezoid. And so what it does, when you have a border, it goes on the diagonal. And so if you were to set all borders a different color with a 0 width and 0 height, you would just have 4 triangles like pointing these different ways. And so by setting the border left and border right to be transparent, that makes that diagonal shape on either side. And then we have the bottom that's colored. And so that's ends up being our trapezoid. And then the height is nothing because we don't actually see it. And so that's the way that I like to do diagonals, but we have a border around that. And so there's a few different ways to do it. You could do a clip path. You could stack 2 divs, which actually I'm considering doing that now because that's kind of hacky and fun. But yeah, there's a few different things. You can also do the perspective where if you have a div and then you have a div on top of it that has perspective, you could say like set perspective to true or whatever. And then when you want to preserve the 3D element and you rotate it, then it actually rotates it in 3D space. And so you can see it as if you're looking at a piece of paper angled or something. And so that's another way to do a trapezoid too. And so all good and fun. I'll stick with this kind of fun thing just because I like it. And we'll say it has a width of 50. Is that about right? Yeah, that's about right. A width of 50, and then we'll have the border bottom. I'll just stick that there. And then I'm going to do a pseudo element that does the same thing but slightly bigger, so that way it fakes a border. Ooh, that's kind of fun. Okay, so I'm going to do a before, and then I'm going to do my display block, and then content none, and then basically going to copy this, only I'm going to make it blue, and I'm going to position it differently. If only everything was tabbed properly. Okay, there we go. All right, so I've got to position this absolutely and then add the Z index of -1. So position, absolute, there you are, and then Z index -1. Now it's behind, and I also want it to be a little bit wider, and I want it to be centered. And so I'm going to make it a width of 60. And then I'm going to center it with, let's see. Translate X. There we go. Check that out. Oh, I'm happy with that. Okay, cool. You never know when things will go well or terribly in a live coding thing, so the sacrifices worked. Okay. Position relative, and then I'm going to do top, and then what is that at now? 20 pixels? Oh, less than that, 15. Check it. Okay, cool. And now we can scoot our ledge down too. I should have thought this through. This is the whole organization thing. But again, we're live coding, so I hope you forgive me. That one goes down 20 pixels. Oh, that one's also 15. Dang it, I messed up. Okay, there it is. Hey! Okay, I have 10 minutes left. I'm going to, dang it. Okay, I got a little ambitious. I'm going to ignore the top spire. You know that it's a triangle. And I'm going to just add the clock face really quick. Clock face, you know, I'm just gonna make it a circle so you can know it exists. But typically, if I had more than 9 minutes and 35 seconds left, I would do the before is going to be the actual circle, and then the after I would have the actual face in there. And one thing that a lot of people do that I haven't fully mastered yet is doing gradients to make really, really fancy things. And so I'll show you really quick after this so that we can kind of see some of the resources I threw together for you. So that is 65 by 65. So we got our display block. We got our content blank, width and height 65 pixels. And then background, that's white, right? There it is. And then, let's see, that's positioned relative, so I can position it absolutely pretty safely. And I'm just going to do that same thing I did before. Top 50%, left 50%. Transform, translate, negative 50%. And then, oh, I know what to do. Hang on a second. And then border radius 50%. Cool. We got our circle. We got our border is 3 pixels solid blue. And then we don't want it to be 50% down. There it is. Okay, cool. That's in there. But I did want to show you that whole linear gradient thing that I told you about. So I will get back to this if we have time, but you get the general idea, right? There's some nods in the room. So I'm sorry we couldn't finish, but I was too ambitious when I was picking graphics for you to choose. So one thing that I really wanted to show you is asingledIv.com. So it's a.singledIv.com. And the person who makes this site, Lynn Fisher, makes amazing CSS art with just a single div. This whole thing is just a single div. This whole thing is just a single div. And that is through the power of linear gradients. And it's amazing what people can do with those, and I still don't fully understand it. But when you want to add a background to a div, you can have as many gradients as you want and layer them on top of each other. And so you can make some really complex things with just one gradient. One thing, not to toot my own horn, but one of my most popular pens is this camera, and that's because I used multiple linear gradients to make that camera lens. That's just one div with a ton of gradients on top of each other that are radial gradients. So yeah, that being said, she has made faces and amazing works of art, Monsters, Inc. characters, all within a single div because she has mastered linear gradients. And that is a whole other level of art that if you want to check it out, go for it. I have not mastered that yet, but it's really, really neat. And so, that being said, I wanted to show you a few different resources and examples. So again, asingledIv.com. Christina Gordon, she is a CSS art connoisseur. She actually made a class for this where she kind of walks through different techniques, kind of a longer version of this talk, really, so that way you can make some CSS art yourself. And then also CodePen. Again, not to toot my employer, I made this before I worked there, but they have an awesome newsletter that's kind of chock full of art that comes out every week. And then we also have a podcast and stuff where we talk about making CSS art and just interesting dev topics and stuff too. But I hope this was interesting for you. I have left 5 minutes for questions, or if you say, keep working, Cassidy, I could keep live coding. But that's all I have for you.